The Paleolithic period in Britain represents the earliest phase of human occupation, beginning around 800,000 BC and extending to approximately 10,000 BC. Archaeological evidence indicates that human presence during this time was intermittent, reflecting both climatic variability and the capacity of early hominins to adapt to a range of environments. The first populations identified in Britain belonged to archaic hominins such as Homo antecessor, followed later by Homo heidelbergensis, and eventually by anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens, during the Upper Paleolithic. These populations occupied predominantly southern and eastern regions of the island, exploiting river valleys, plains, and coastal areas that offered both resources and mobility. The earliest known occupation sites in Britain, such as Haysborough in Norfolk, Pakefield in Suffolk, and Boxgrove in West Sussex, provide substantial evidence for the presence of hominins in the Lower Paleolithic. The Haysborough site, dated to approximately 800,000 BC, yielded numerous flint tools, primarily simple flakes and cores, associated with evidence of butchery and marrow extraction on large faunal remains. Pakefield, slightly later, is notable for a concentration of flint implements alongside remains of extinct mammals, including elephants, rhinoceroses, and deer species, demonstrating early hominins' ability to exploit megafauna in open, steppe-like environments. Boxgrove, dated to approximately 500,000 BC, presents a more complex record, with carefully shaped hand axes, cleavers, and scrapers. The site includes evidence of structured butchery of horse and large bovids, as well as the likely presence of temporary shelters or activity zones, indicating more sophisticated patterns of spatial organization and subsistence. Lower Paleolithic populations were adapted to fluctuating glacial and interglacial climates characteristic of the Middle Pleistocene. Britain during this period experienced cycles of extreme cold, with glacial advances and warmer interglacial phases. During glacial periods, much of northern and central Britain was covered by ice sheets, forcing populations to retreat southward or to regions of open tundra and steppe. The technological capabilities of lower Paleolithic populations in Britain are exemplified by the development of the Acheulean hand axe tradition, particularly visible at Boxgrove. Hand axes were bifacially worked, standardized in shape, and employed in butchery, digging, and possibly woodworking activities. Flint knapping techniques show both functional and skillful production methods, indicating the transmission of knowledge across generations. While the precise social structure of these groups cannot be definitively reconstructed, spatial organization at sites such as Boxgrove suggests coordinated activities, possibly involving cooperative hunting, tool production, and processing of animal carcasses. During the Middle Paleolithic, from approximately 300,000 to 40,000 BC, Britain saw the emergence of Homo heidelbergensis populations, succeeded later by Neanderthals during cooler climatic phases. The sites from this period are less abundant, partly due to the extensive glaciation that destroyed or obscured archaeological evidence. Nevertheless, evidence from southern England and the Thames Valley indicates that Neanderthal populations repeatedly colonized Britain during warm interstadial periods. Lithic assemblages of this time include Mysterian-style flake tools, points, scrapers, and retouched flakes, reflecting a more specialized toolkit adapted to hunting and processing animals in a woodland-dominated environment. Faunal remains indicate continued reliance on deer, aurochs, horse, and wild boar, with selective butchery and transport patterns suggesting the organization of hunting parties and knowledge of local ecology. The Upper Paleolithic, beginning around 40,000 BC, coincides with the arrival of anatomically modern humans, Homo sapiens, in Britain. This period is characterized by the development of more sophisticated toolkits, including blade technology, bone and antler implements, and evidence of symbolic behavior in the form of personal ornaments and pigment use. Sites such as Goth's Cave in Somerset provide evidence of both subsistence practices and early ritualized behavior, including cut marks on human and animal bones indicative of systematic butchery and possible mortuary practices. Upper Paleolithic populations were highly mobile, exploiting seasonal variations in resources and adapting to the fluctuating climatic conditions of the late glacial period, including the last glacial maximum between approximately 26,500 and 19,000 BC. The environmental context of Paleolithic Britain was dynamic and directly influenced patterns of settlement, subsistence, and technology. During interglacial phases, forests of oak, hazel, and pine covered much of the southern and eastern regions, while river valleys and wetlands provided abundant freshwater and resources. Faunal populations included red deer, aurochs, reindeer in northern latitudes, and large herbivores such as mammoth and woolly rhinoceros in colder phases. Human groups adjusted their mobility and toolkits according to these conditions, with evidence of temporary camps in river valleys, coastal sites, and open plains. Archaeological remains indicate that early humans were capable of long-distance movement, possibly following migratory herds, and may have used simple rafts or natural crossings to access resource-rich areas. Quantitative estimates of population density during the Lower and Middle Paleolithic suggest that hominin groups were small, likely ranging from 20 to 50 individuals per social unit, with seasonal aggregation in favorable habitats. Population growth was constrained by environmental pressures, subsistence limits, and high mortality rates. The carrying capacity of the landscape was influenced by the availability of large herbivores, freshwater sources, and shelter, resulting in sparse occupation with periodic abandonment of marginal areas. Archaeological evidence suggests that groups were capable of strategic planning, as seen in coordinated hunting strategies, the transport of high-quality flint across considerable distances, and the repeated reuse of favored sites. During the late Paleolithic, from approximately 12,000 to 10,000 BC, Britain experienced a significant environmental transformation with the retreat of the Davinchian ice sheets. Rising temperatures led to the expansion of mixed woodland and the re-establishment of river systems and wetland habitats. Human populations expanded into previously glaciated northern areas, such as Yorkshire, Northumberland, and southern Scotland. Lithic assemblages from this period display regional differentiation, including microlithic tools used in composite hunting implements. These tools enabled effective hunting of reindeer, red deer, wild boar, and small mammals, as well as fishing and fowling activities. Sites such as Starcar in North Yorkshire, although more thoroughly studied for Mesolithic occupation, show evidence for continuous human adaptation and technological continuity from the late Paleolithic. The Paleolithic record in Britain also demonstrates early interaction with continental Europe. Periodic land bridges, particularly the area now submerged as Doggerland in the southern North Sea, facilitated migration and exchange of technological innovations. Flint material, fauna, and tool types indicate that populations in Britain were part of broader European cultural and ecological networks, adapting knowledge from continental hominins to local conditions. The repeated colonization and abandonment of Britain during glacial cycles highlight the resilience of early human populations and their ability to exploit a range of ecological niches under challenging climatic circumstances. The Mesolithic period in Britain, spanning approximately 10,000 to 4,000 BC, represents a transitional era between the Paleolithic hunter-gatherer occupation and the Neolithic adoption of agriculture and sedentism. This period followed the last glacial maximum, which ended around 11,700 BC, when ice sheets that had previously covered much of northern and central Britain retreated, resulting in significant environmental and ecological transformations. Rising temperatures, the formation of dense forests, rivers, lakes, and wetlands, and the emergence of temperate climatic conditions created habitats that supported a diverse array of fauna and flora. These changes enabled human populations to expand into areas previously uninhabitable during the glacial periods, while also prompting adaptive strategies to exploit newly available resources. Mesolithic populations were primarily semi-nomadic hunter-gatherers, whose subsistence strategies were closely tied to the seasonal availability of plants and animals. Archaeological evidence indicates that these groups were highly mobile, occupying river valleys, floodplains, coastal zones, and forest edges, often establishing temporary or seasonal camps. Sites such as Starcar in North Yorkshire, Mount Sandel in County Londonderry, and Howick in Northumberland provide detailed insight into Mesolithic life. At Starcar, excavations have revealed the remains of wooden platforms constructed in wetlands, hearths, and flint microlith toolkits. The site also preserves evidence of red deer antler headdresses, suggesting symbolic or ritual practices alongside practical hunting activities. Mount Sandel demonstrates a similar pattern of repeated seasonal occupation, with circular huts, hearths, and evidence for the exploitation of riverine and terrestrial resources. Tool technology during the Mesolithic period exhibits significant regional variation and adaptation to local environments. Microliths, small flint blades often used as components of composite tools, were characteristic of Mesolithic lithic assemblages. These implements were employed in hunting, fishing, woodworking, and food processing activities. Retouched flakes, scrapers, and burins complement the toolkit, reflecting specialized tasks for processing hides, plants, and animal carcasses. Evidence from flint sources indicates that Mesolithic populations transported raw material over distances exceeding 20 kilometers, demonstrating knowledge of lithic procurement networks and mobility patterns. The diversity of microlith types, including trapezes, crescents, and points, suggests functional specialization adapted to hunting strategies, including the use of arrows, spears, and harpoons. Subsistence strategies during the Mesolithic involved a combination of hunting, fishing, fowling, and plant foraging. Faunal remains indicate the presence of red deer, roe deer, wild boar, aurochs, elk, and smaller mammals, complemented by freshwater fish such as pike and salmon, and marine shellfish in coastal regions. Botanical evidence, including charred seeds and nuts, demonstrates the collection and consumption of acorns, hazelnuts, berries, and tubers. The dietary breadth and seasonal adjustments to resource availability suggest a detailed knowledge of local ecosystems and the capacity for strategic planning. Evidence from isotopic analyses of human remains indicates a diet with a significant reliance on both terrestrial and aquatic resources, reflecting the flexibility of Mesolithic subsistence practices in diverse environments. Settlement patterns during the Mesolithic reveal spatial organization linked to resource exploitation. Sites were typically small, ranging from temporary hunting camps to larger seasonal aggregation locations. Excavations at Star Kar have uncovered the remains of structures interpreted as circular huts, with post holes suggesting frameworks constructed from timber. These structures indicate a degree of permanence within seasonal occupation and may reflect early forms of social organization and division of labor. The repeated occupation of sites implies territorial knowledge and possibly the use of defined foraging ranges. Radiocarbon dating and stratigraphic analyses demonstrate that these patterns persisted for centuries, indicating the stability of settlement strategies despite environmental variability. Environmental changes during the Mesolithic period significantly influenced the distribution and behavior of human populations. The inundation of the Doggerland landmass, a vast area of low-lying terrain in the southern North Sea, between approximately 8,000 and 6,000 BC, resulted in the isolation of Britain from continental Europe. Before this inundation, Doggerland provided a corridor for human migration, the transmission of technology, and access to marine and terrestrial resources. The subsequent isolation of Britain created new ecological conditions, requiring adaptation to island environments. Rising sea levels and the expansion of forests transformed previously open landscapes into dense woodlands, altering the availability of game and necessitating specialized hunting techniques. The exploitation of aquatic resources was particularly significant during the Mesolithic, as evidenced by sites located along rivers, lakes, and coastal areas. Fish traps, harpoons, and bone or antler hooks demonstrate the technological adaptation to freshwater and marine environments. Shell middens, deposits of mollusk shells often associated with food processing, provide quantitative evidence of the intensity and scale of exploitation. These middens indicate repeated occupation and organized subsistence practices, reflecting both the abundance of marine resources and the capacity of human populations to exploit them systematically. In coastal regions, the presence of seal, seabird, and fish remains underscores the integration of maritime resources into the diet and economy. The Mesolithic period also exhibits evidence of early symbolic behavior and cultural expression. Personal ornaments, including perforated animal teeth, shells, and red ochre, have been recovered from sites such as Star Kar and Gough's Cave. These artifacts suggest the use of symbolic markers, possibly associated with social identity, status, or ritual activity. In addition, the modification of red deer antlers into headdresses at Star Kar may indicate ceremonial use, hunting cults, or cognitive and social complexity beyond subsistence. These cultural expressions provide insight into the cognitive and social capacities of Mesolithic populations, illustrating the interplay between material culture, symbolic behavior, and environmental adaptation. The social organization of Mesolithic communities was likely characterized by small-scale, flexible groups, potentially ranging from 20 to 50 individuals per social unit. Such groups maintained mobility to exploit seasonal resources while establishing temporary sites for aggregation. Cooperative hunting strategies are inferred from faunal evidence, tool assemblages, and the spatial arrangement of activity areas. The division of labor, although not directly observable, can be inferred from task-specific tools, faunal processing, and evidence of dwellings. Kinship networks and intergroup interactions may have facilitated the exchange of materials, techniques, and information, contributing to cultural continuity and resilience within isolated environments. Mortuary practices during the Mesolithic are rare, but provide additional evidence of social and symbolic behavior. Sites such as Goth's Cave contain human remains exhibiting cut marks and other modifications, interpreted as either secondary mortuary practices or cannibalistic activity under specific ecological or social circumstances. The evidence for deliberate placement or modification of human remains, although limited, suggests recognition of social norms and symbolic behavior within Mesolithic communities. Such practices may have served to reinforce group cohesion, establish social hierarchies, or negotiate interactions between groups within broader territorial landscapes. Quantitative data from Mesolithic sites indicate varying intensities of occupation across Britain. Northern regions, including Scotland and northern England, were occupied during warmer intervals, whereas southern regions such as East Anglia and the Thames Valley exhibit more continuous evidence of habitation. Artifact densities, lithic scatters, and hearth distributions provide measurable indicators of activity areas and population levels. These data suggest that Mesolithic populations were not uniform in density or distribution, but rather responsive to environmental constraints, resource availability, and ecological opportunities. The Mesolithic period in Britain demonstrates significant continuity with preceding Paleolithic practices while introducing adaptations to post-glacial environmental changes. Tool production maintained a reliance on flint, with increased standardization and specialization in microlithic technology. Mobility patterns evolved to exploit forested environments, riverine systems, and coastal resources. Cultural expression, as seen in personal ornaments and symbolic artifacts, indicates emerging social complexity, while settlement structures reflect early planning and spatial organization. The period establishes the foundation for subsequent Neolithic developments, including the domestication of plants and animals, permanent settlement, and the construction of monumental architecture. Regional variation during the Mesolithic is evident both archaeologically and ecologically. In southern England, sites such as Howick demonstrate exploitation of estuarine and coastal resources, with evidence for complex seasonal scheduling and transport of materials over distances exceeding 30 kilometers. Northern sites, including Starcar and Kinloch on the Isle of Lewis, illustrate adaptations to wetland environments and resource-rich river valleys, including the construction of timber platforms and the utilization of freshwater fish. Western regions, including Wales and southwestern Scotland, exhibit lower site densities but evidence of seasonal hunting camps and specialized lithic production, reflecting ecological constraints and mobility strategies. Interactions with continental Europe continued during the Mesolithic, despite the isolation of Britain following the submergence of Doggerland. Similarities in lithic technology, subsistence strategies, and symbolic artifacts indicate that cultural knowledge and technological innovations were transmitted across populations, possibly via maritime contacts or prior migration routes. These connections emphasize that Mesolithic Britain was by approximately 4000 BC. The Mesolithic period in Britain concluded with the gradual adoption of agriculture and the Neolithic transition. This transition marked a significant shift in subsistence strategies, settlement patterns, and social organization. However, the Mesolithic legacy persisted in aspects of material culture, tool technology, and environmental knowledge. The period demonstrates the capacity of human populations to adapt to dynamic post-glacial landscapes, maintain complex social networks, exploit diverse ecological niches, and develop cultural and symbolic behaviors that foreshadow later developments in prehistoric Britain. The Neolithic period in Britain, spanning approximately 4000 to 2500 BC, represents a fundamental transformation in human society, economy, and landscape management, marking the transition from mobile Mesolithic hunter-gatherer communities to sedentary agricultural populations. This period is defined by the widespread adoption of domesticated plants and animals, the establishment of permanent settlements, and the construction of monumental architecture, reflecting significant social, technological, and cultural developments. The transformation was facilitated by environmental stabilization following the post-glacial warming of the late Mesolithic and was influenced by interactions with contemporary continental Neolithic cultures across northwestern Europe. Agriculture became the principal subsistence strategy during the Neolithic. Populations cultivated a variety of cereals, including emmer wheat, einkorn wheat, and barley, employing techniques adapted to the temperate British climate and soil conditions. Crop rotation, fallowing, and selective planting improved yields over successive generations. Animal domestication complemented cereal cultivation, with cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs providing meat, milk, hides, and secondary products such as wool. Domesticated animals also played a role in draft work and soil management, facilitating the expansion of cultivated land. Archaeobotanical analyses indicate that early Neolithic communities manipulated plant resources extensively, using grinding stones and mortars to process grains, and employing storage pits to secure food reserves for periods of scarcity. Permanent settlements emerged during the Neolithic, characterized by rectangular or circular timber structures, post-hole patterns indicating dwellings, and associated storage and working areas. Sites such as Windmill Hill in Wiltshire, Hazelton North in Gloucestershire, and Balbridie in Scotland demonstrate the diversity and regional variation of settlement organization. Settlement size ranged from small hamlets accommodating a few dozen individuals to larger communities of several hundred inhabitants. Settlement planning indicates an awareness of defensive considerations, proximity to arable land, water sources, and access to raw materials for tool production. These communities maintained continuity over generations, with evidence of long-term occupation reflected in stratified layers of domestic activity, midden deposits, and artifact accumulations. Material culture during the Neolithic exhibits significant technological and aesthetic innovation. Polished stone tools, including axes, adzes, and chisels, became central to agricultural and woodworking practices. Flint continued to be extensively used for cutting, scraping, and hunting implements, with the emergence of specialized production centers indicating craft specialization. Pottery production also expanded during this period, with distinctive regional styles such as carinated bowls and plain bowls. Pottery was used for cooking, storage, and possibly ritual purposes. Decoration and form suggest functional and symbolic roles, with certain vessel types associated with mortuary or ceremonial contexts. Trade networks facilitated the circulation of exotic materials, including jadeite axes from the Alps, metavolcanic tuff, and flint from Kent, highlighting long-distance exchange and connectivity with continental Europe. Monumental architecture represents one of the most visible and enduring aspects of Neolithic Britain. Long barrows, constructed as burial mounds with internal chambers, reflect complex mortuary practices and social stratification. These structures, such as West Kennet Long Barrow in Wiltshire and Hazelton North in Gloucestershire, served as collective burial sites, sometimes containing multiple individuals arranged according to age, sex, or social status. Mortuary deposits include human remains, pottery, stone tools, and animal bones, indicating the integration of funerary, ritual, and possibly symbolic practices. Long barrows were typically aligned with topographical or astronomical features, suggesting a conscious engagement with landscape and cosmology. Henges and stone circles, including the most famous sites of Stonehenge, Avebury, and Doington Walls, represent further monumental expression. Henges are defined by circular or oval earthworks, often accompanied by timber or stone uprights. The construction of these complexes required considerable labor organization, technical knowledge, and social coordination. Stonehenge, for example, was constructed over several phases, with sarsen uprights transported from distances exceeding 20 kilometers and bluestones imported from the Preseli Hills in southwest Wales, approximately 220 kilometers from the site. Archaeological analyses suggest that construction involved coordinated transportation, shaping, and placement of massive stones, reflecting both technical capability and social cohesion. Neolithic communities also engaged in landscape modification beyond monument construction. Field systems, trackways, causeways, and terraces indicate early forms of agricultural land management and territorial organization. Evidence from sites such as the Somerset Levels demonstrates water management, including drainage and the creation of trackways to facilitate movement across wetlands. These modifications allowed expansion of arable land, improved access to resources, and facilitated connectivity between settlements and ceremonial sites. Such landscape engineering reflects an understanding of environmental processes, resource optimization, and communal labor organization. Social organization during the Neolithic period was hierarchical yet flexible, structured around kinship, lineage, and territorial affiliation. The construction of communal monuments and coordinated agricultural activities indicates the presence of leadership or coordination mechanisms to mobilize labor. Burial practices within long barrows suggest differentiation based on status or social role, while the uniformity of domestic structures within settlements indicates communal organization and shared resource management. Interaction between communities is evidenced by shared material culture, standardized pottery styles, and the exchange of raw materials, implying networks of cooperation, communication, and possibly competitive display. Ritual and symbolic behavior were central to Neolithic life, as evidenced by the deliberate placement of monuments, deposition of artifacts, and mortuary practices. Sites such as Stonehenge exhibit alignments with solar and lunar events, including solstices, indicating observational knowledge of celestial phenomena and their integration into ceremonial or calendrical systems. Timber circles, such as those at Woodhenge and Dangton Walls, reflect similar engagement with landscape and cosmology. Depositional practices, including the interment of pottery, polished axes, and animal remains within ritual contexts, demonstrate a complex belief system in which material culture mediated social, cosmological, and ideological relationships. Archaeological evidence from the Neolithic also indicates technological continuity and adaptation from the Mesolithic. While agriculture became dominant, hunting, fishing, and gathering continued to supplement diets, particularly in northern and upland regions. Lithic technology persisted in tool production, with increasingly specialized forms reflecting agricultural and domestic tasks. Flint axes were polished and sometimes mounted on handles for woodworking and land clearance, while scrapers and knives facilitated food processing and hide preparation. Composite tools, including sickles with microlithic inserts, demonstrate integration of inherited techniques with new economic activities. Quantitative data from settlement and monument sites illustrate regional variation in population density and cultural expression. Southern and eastern England, including the Thames Valley, Wessex, and the Chilterns, exhibits high densities of long barrows, henges, and settlement evidence, reflecting favorable soils, riverine access, and connectivity to continental Europe. Northern regions, including Scotland and the Orkney Islands, display distinctive architectural styles, such as chambered cairns and passage graves, indicating adaptation to local geology, climate, and social organization. Western regions, including Wales and the Lake District, show smaller settlements and isolated monuments, reflecting ecological constraints and localized cultural development. These variations highlight both the adaptation of communities to environmental conditions and the persistence of interregional connections. Trade and exchange networks facilitated technological and cultural development during the Neolithic. Polished stone axes, particularly those made from imported greenstone, jadeite, or dolerite, were transported across considerable distances from the Alps to Britain and between regions within the island. The presence of exotic materials alongside local production, diet, and subsistence strategies reflect the integration of domesticated and wild resources. Archaeobotanical studies demonstrate the cultivation of cereals such as wheat and barley, supplemented by legumes, fruits, and nuts. Animal husbandry included cattle, sheep, goats, and pigs, providing meat, milk, and secondary products, while hunting and fishing persisted as supplemental activities. Isotopic analyses of human remains indicate a mixed diet with regional variation, emphasizing flexibility and adaptation to environmental conditions. Seasonal exploitation of resources is evident in settlement patterns, faunal remains, and storage features, reflecting careful planning and resource management to ensure food security. By 2500 BC, Neolithic communities had established complex social, economic, and ritual systems that profoundly shaped the British landscape. Settlement patterns, monument construction, agricultural practices, and trade networks demonstrate a high degree of organization, technical skill, and cultural continuity. These developments laid the groundwork for the subsequent Bronze Age, during which metalworking, social stratification, and long-distance trade would further transform society. The Neolithic period represents a period of stabilization, experimentation, and expansion, illustrating the adaptation of human populations to diverse ecological and social contexts across Britain. The Neolithic transition in Britain was not uniform in pace or expression. Coastal and lowland regions experienced earlier adoption of agriculture, permanent settlement, and monumental construction, while upland and northern areas retained mixed subsistence strategies for longer periods. Chronological studies indicate regional sequences in monument building, tool production, and settlement establishment, reflecting both environmental constraints and cultural diffusion. Despite variation, the underlying trends of agricultural adoption, permanent settlement, and ritualized landscape use were pervasive across the island, representing a transformative phase in the prehistory of Britain. Environmental management during the Neolithic extended beyond agriculture into broader landscape modification. Woodland clearance, wetland management, and trackway construction facilitated movement, resource access, and connectivity between settlements. Sites such as the Somerset Levels illustrate early water management practices, including drainage ditches, causeways, and wooden trackways, indicating a complex understanding of hydrology and terrain. Such modifications demonstrate planning, labor coordination, and adaptation to environmental conditions, reflecting both practical and social imperatives in Neolithic communities. Social and ceremonial integration is evident in the construction of large-scale monuments and associated landscapes. Henge complexes, long barrows, stone circles, and causewayed enclosures represent both ritualized space and social focal points for community activities. The alignment of monuments with topographical and celestial features suggests codification of communal knowledge, calendrical awareness, and the integration of ideology into landscape planning. Monumental construction required mobilization of labor, resource management, and technical knowledge, underscoring the organizational capacity of Neolithic populations. The Bronze Age in Britain, spanning approximately 2500 to 800 BC, marks a period of technological, social, and economic transformation characterized by the introduction and widespread use of metal tools and weapons. This era followed the Neolithic and represents a stage of significant innovation in material culture, trade networks, settlement organization, and social stratification. The period is defined by the adoption of copper and bronze metallurgy, the construction of monumental burial and ceremonial sites, the development of long-distance exchange networks, and increasing evidence of territoriality and social hierarchy. The transition from stone-based technology to metalworking occurred in stages, reflecting both local innovation and interaction with continental Europe. Bronze, an alloy of copper and tin, was introduced to Britain during the early Bronze Age, around 2500 BC. The production of bronze required knowledge of smelting techniques, alloying proportions, and casting methods. Archaeological evidence indicates that copper was initially sourced from regions such as the Great Orme in North Wales, the Malvern Hills, and Cornwall, while tin was primarily obtained from southwestern Britain, particularly Cornwall and Devon. The acquisition and processing of these metals necessitated long-distance trade networks, both within Britain and across the Atlantic facade of Europe. Metallurgical analyses of tools, weapons, and ornaments indicate standardized production methods and an increasing level of technical skill in casting, hammering, and finishing metal artifacts. Bronze tools and weapons replaced stone implements for many purposes, while stone continued to be used for grinding, woodworking, and ceremonial contexts. Tools included axes, chisels, knives, and sickles, which facilitated woodworking, agriculture, and construction. Weapons, such as daggers, spearheads, and halberds, indicate the development of warfare technology and personal armament. The standardization of bronze objects and the presence of hoards suggest both practical use and symbolic or prestige value. Hoards, often buried in river valleys, bogs, or other prominent locations, are interpreted as ritual deposits, votive offerings, or caches for trade and storage, demonstrating the intersection of economy, ritual practice, and social signaling. Settlement patterns during the Bronze Age reflect continuity with the Neolithic in terms of permanent occupation, while introducing new organizational structures. Communities were typically located on fertile lowlands, river terraces, and sheltered valleys, with some evidence of upland occupation for seasonal exploitation of grazing and woodland resources. Houses were generally rectangular or round, constructed using timber, wattle, and daub, and often surrounded by enclosures or palisades. Some settlements exhibit evidence of planned layout, including coordinated spacing of dwellings, communal areas, and storage facilities. In later Bronze Age contexts, hilltop settlements emerged, often fortified with ditches, banks, and timber palisades, indicating increased concern with defense, territoriality, and social differentiation. Burial practices in the Bronze Age display substantial variation, reflecting regional and temporal differences in social organization and belief systems. Early Bronze Age burial mounds, or round barrows, typically contain single or multiple interments accompanied by grave goods such as pottery, flint tools, copper or bronze implements, and personal ornaments. The beaker culture, introduced around 2400 BC, is associated with distinctive pottery vessels, metal daggers, and archers' equipment, often placed in graves to indicate social status or personal identity. Cremation became increasingly common during the Middle and Late Bronze Age, with ashes deposited in urns and sometimes accompanied by bronze tools, weapons, and decorative items. The construction of barrows and cemeteries reflects both mortuary ritual and the reinforcement of social hierarchies, as well as the spatial assertion of territorial control. Ritual and ceremonial activity extended beyond burial practices to include the construction of large-scale monuments and enclosures. Henges and stone circles continued to be constructed, often reusing Neolithic sites or incorporating newly imported cultural elements. Sites such as Avebury, Stonehenge, and the Rollright stones show continuity of ceremonial practice while adapting to Bronze Age social and technological contexts. Timber circles, ceremonial avenues, and ritual pits are also common, indicating complex patterns of symbolic behavior. Votive deposits of bronze axes, weapons, and ornaments in rivers, bogs, and wetland areas highlight the ritual significance of water, landscape features, and deposition practices, reflecting a worldview that integrated technology, material wealth, and spiritual or social expression. Agriculture remained the principal economic activity during the Bronze Age, with cereals such as barley, wheat, and oats cultivated across fertile lowlands. Animal husbandry expanded to include cattle, sheep, pigs, and goats, with evidence for dairying, wool production, and meat consumption. Archaeobotanical and faunal analyses indicate that Bronze Age populations employed mixed farming strategies, integrating crop cultivation with grazing and supplementary hunting and foraging. Seasonal transhumance of livestock to upland pastures occurred in some regions, particularly in northern and western Britain, demonstrating complex management of environmental resources and adaptation to diverse ecological zones. Trade and exchange networks during the Bronze Age became increasingly sophisticated, facilitating the movement of raw materials, finished metal goods, and cultural influences across Britain and into continental Europe. Tin and copper were transported over considerable distances, often over land and water routes, to production centers where alloys were made and objects cast. The distribution of beaker pottery, metal ornaments, and stone axes demonstrates the existence of long-distance trade networks linking Britain with Ireland, Iberia, the Low Countries, and Central Europe. Such networks facilitated technological diffusion, stylistic influence, and social interaction, reinforcing both local identity and interregional connectivity. The Bronze Age also witnessed the development of craft specialization and technological knowledge beyond metallurgy. Pottery production diversified in form and function, with distinctive regional styles including decorated urns, beakers, and storage vessels. Textile production, hill forts, and defensive enclosures emerged primarily in the later Bronze Age, around 1200 to 800 BC, reflecting growing concerns with territoriality, resource protection, and social organization. These structures, often located on elevated terrain with commanding views, were constructed with ditches, ramparts, timber palisades, and sometimes multiple concentric defenses. While the primary function of hill forts remains debated, they likely served as centers for communal activity, storage, defense, and social gathering. The distribution of hill forts varies regionally, with concentrations in southern England, the Midlands, and Wessex, indicating areas of higher population density, strategic importance, or social complexity. Cultural continuity from the Neolithic is evident alongside Bronze Age innovations. Monumental construction, ceremonial deposition, and landscape modification persisted, demonstrating enduring patterns of social and ritual behavior. However, the introduction of metalworking, new burial practices, long-distance trade, and territorial settlements reflects adaptive responses to demographic growth, environmental pressures, and evolving social structures. Regional variation is pronounced, with northern, western, and upland regions retaining aspects of earlier Neolithic practice, while southern and eastern areas exhibit greater intensity of monument building, settlement density, and material wealth. Environmental management during the Bronze Age involved both agricultural intensification and landscape engineering. Woodland clearance enabled the expansion of arable land, pasture creation, and the construction of settlements and monuments. Irrigation, drainage ditches, and field boundaries facilitated control over water and soil resources. Archaeological evidence from sites such as the Somerset Levels, the Thames Valley, and upland regions demonstrates organized labor for landscape modification, integration of agricultural planning with settlement patterns, and coordination of communal labor for monument construction. These interventions highlight the interaction of human activity with ecological systems and the strategic adaptation of landscapes to support growing populations. Social hierarchy and organization during the Bronze Age are inferred from burial differentiation, monumental construction, hoarding practices, and settlement patterns. The emergence of prestige goods, including finely crafted metal objects, exotic stone axes, and decorated pottery, indicates status differentiation within communities. Control over production, trade, and ceremonial deposition likely reinforced hierarchical structures and social authority. Communities were organized into territories with clear recognition of communal spaces, burial grounds, and resource areas, reflecting coordination, leadership, and negotiation of social relationships. Networks of exchange and ceremonial interaction further integrated communities across Britain and with continental populations. Subsistence strategies continued to integrate domestic and wild resources. Farming and herding remained dominant, while hunting, fishing, and foraging supplemented diets, particularly in upland, forested, and coastal areas. Evidence from faunal assemblages demonstrates the consumption of cattle, sheep, pigs, deer, wild birds, and fish, reflecting mixed subsistence strategies adapted to ecological diversity. Storage pits, granaries, and animal enclosures indicate advanced planning and food security measures. Seasonal movement of livestock, resource scheduling, and careful exploitation of wild flora and fauna demonstrate continued environmental knowledge inherited from the Mesolithic and Neolithic periods. By the end of the Bronze Age, around 800 BC, Britain exhibited complex social, economic, and technological organization characterized by regional variation, trade networks, and ceremonial landscapes. The widespread adoption of metalworking, the establishment of hill forts, and the expansion of agriculture and pastoralism reflect dynamic adaptation to environmental, social, and technological conditions. Monumental and ritual landscapes demonstrate the integration of belief systems, social authority, and material culture. The Bronze Age set the stage for the subsequent Iron Age, during which further technological innovation, social stratification, and intergroup interaction would transform Britain's human landscape, establishing patterns of tribal organization, fortified settlements, and material culture that persisted into the historical era. The Iron Age in Britain, spanning approximately 800 BC to 43 AD, represents a period of significant technological, social, and political development, defined primarily by the widespread adoption of iron metallurgy, the emergence of fortified settlements, complex tribal societies, and evolving agricultural, craft, and trade systems. The period demonstrates a continuum from Bronze Age traditions while introducing innovations that reshaped material culture, social organization, and territorial management. The transition to iron occurred over several centuries and was influenced by continental contact, particularly with the Hallstatt and Latine cultures of Central and Western Europe. Iron technology replaced bronze as the primary material for tools and weapons, although bronze continued to be used for ornaments, ceremonial objects, and some implements. Iron smelting and forging techniques enabled the production of stronger, more durable tools for agriculture, woodworking, and warfare. Iron plowshares, sickles, knives, and axes improved efficiency in cultivation and land clearance, facilitating expansion of arable land and more intensive farming. Weapons, including swords, spears, and shields, became widespread among warrior elites, reflecting social differentiation, defensive requirements, and intergroup conflict. The distribution of iron artifacts indicates regional specialization and the development of local smithing traditions, with some areas producing high-quality implements that were exchanged over significant distances. Settlement patterns during the Iron Age demonstrate both continuity with earlier Bronze Age communities and the emergence of new forms of territorial organization. Hill forts became a prominent feature across Britain, particularly from 600 BC onwards, serving as defensive structures, centers of settlement, and symbols of social and political authority. These fortified sites, such as Maiden Castle in Dorset, Danbury in Hampshire, and Eildon Hill in Scotland, display complex construction, including multiple concentric ramparts, ditches, timber palisades, and evidence of planned internal layouts. Hill forts vary in size, from small defended enclosures to large settlements capable of housing several hundred individuals, reflecting population density, social hierarchy, and regional strategic importance. Agriculture remains central to Iron Age subsistence, supplemented by pastoralism, hunting, and foraging. Cereal cultivation, primarily wheat, barley, and oats, was complemented by the rearing of cattle, sheep, pigs, and goats. Evidence from palynological and archaeological studies indicates the deliberate management of woodland, grassland, and arable plots to optimize productivity. Field systems, sometimes visible as Celtic fields with regular boundaries, reflect intensive land management, long-term planning, and coordinated labor. Seasonal transhumance of livestock to upland pastures was practiced in some regions, particularly in northern and western Britain, demonstrating adaptation to ecological diversity and resource availability. Craft specialization and material culture flourished during the Iron Age, with significant developments in metalworking, pottery, textile production, and construction. Ironworking involved smelting or in furnaces and forges, producing wrought iron for tools, weapons, and domestic objects. Bronze continued to be used for decorative items, such as torques, bracelets, and pins, reflecting social status and ritual significance. Pottery production became increasingly standardized, with regional styles reflecting functional, symbolic, and cultural differentiation. Textile production, inferred from loom weights and spindle whorls, indicates the manufacture of woolen fabrics for clothing, bedding, and trade. Timber construction of houses, storage pits, and defensive structures was widespread, complemented by stone foundations and dry stone walling in upland and stony regions. Social organization during the Iron Age was predominantly tribal, with communities structured around kinship, lineage, and territorial affiliation. Political authority was decentralized, exercised by regional chieftains or warrior elites who controlled settlements, land, and resources. Hill forts functioned as centers of administration, trade, and defense, with evidence of craft workshops, storage facilities, and domestic dwellings within their boundaries. Burial practices, including inhumation, cremation, and grave goods, indicate social differentiation, with elite individuals often interred with weapons, ornaments, and imported goods. Monumental landscapes, including ritual enclosures, barrows, and causewayed sites, reflect both continuity with Bronze Age ceremonial practice and evolving religious and social frameworks. Trade and exchange networks were extensive, linking Iron Age communities within Britain and with continental Europe. Imported goods, such as Mediterranean pottery, Gaulish coinage, and bronze items, attest to long-distance contacts and cultural interaction. Locally produced goods, including iron tools, textiles, pottery, and decorative metalwork, were exchanged regionally, reinforcing social alliances, economic stability, and political power. Hill forts and settlement centers functioned as nodes within these networks, facilitating trade, communication, and ceremonial gatherings. Evidence from fortified settlements and hill forts exhibit evidence of both defensive and administrative functions. Excavations at Danbury reveal structured internal layouts, including storage pits, domestic roundhouses, and craft areas, as well as evidence of palisades, ditches, and gate constructions. Archaeobotanical and faunal analyses indicate intensive cultivation and stock management within surrounding territories, demonstrating the integration of settlement planning, resource control, and defensive capability. Hill forts in southern England were often located to control key routes, fertile land, and strategic vantage points, while upland forts provided defensive refuge and seasonal exploitation of pastoral resources. Regional variation in material culture, settlement patterns, and ritual practices reflects adaptation to environmental conditions and social dynamics. Southern England, including Wessex and the Thames Valley, exhibits dense concentrations of hill forts, enclosed settlements, and burial monuments, suggesting relatively high population density, economic development, and territorial competition. Northern and western regions, including Scotland, Cumbria, and Wales, display dispersed settlements, less intensive fortification, and continued reliance on mixed subsistence strategies, including upland grazing, hunting, and woodland exploitation. Differences in pottery style, metalwork decoration, and monument type indicate localized cultural expression within broader Iron Age traditions. Agricultural intensification during the Iron Age supported population growth, settlement expansion, and economic specialization. Soil management, clearance of woodland, and enclosure of fields facilitated the sustained production of cereals and pasturage for livestock. Tools such as iron plowshares, sickles, and scythes improved efficiency, while storage pits, granaries, and silos enabled food security and redistribution. Archaeobotanical evidence demonstrates diversified cropping strategies, including wheat, barley, oats, legumes, and nuts, supplemented by hunting, fishing, and gathering of wild plants, emphasizing resilience and environmental adaptation. Metalworking and craft specialization extended beyond utilitarian production to include prestige and ritual goods. Torques, bracelets, pins, and weapons were often elaborately decorated with geometric, spiral, or curvilinear motifs associated with Latin influence from continental Europe. The distribution of such items reflects both social hierarchy and participation in long-distance networks of exchange. Workshop areas within settlements and hill forts provide evidence of local production, repair, and recycling of metal objects, demonstrating technological expertise and the integration of craft knowledge into social and economic structures. The Iron Age in Britain exhibits clear evidence of conflict, defense, and warfare. Hill forts, palisade settlements, and fortified enclosures indicate strategic planning and concern with territorial security. Archaeological finds of weapons, defensive structures, and evidence of burnt or destroyed sites suggest intergroup conflict, raiding, or localized warfare. Control of resources, including fertile land, water sources, and trade routes, likely motivated competition between neighboring tribes or settlements. Despite conflict, evidence also suggests cooperation, alliances, and ritualized forms of social negotiation, including feasting, ceremonial gatherings, and symbolic deposition. Mortuary practices and ritual landscapes provide insight into social organization, belief systems, and regional variation. Cremation and inhumation coexisted, with grave goods reflecting age, sex, occupation, and social status. Barrows, cairns, and ceremonial enclosures continued to be used, indicating continuity with Bronze Age practice. Depositional rituals in rivers, bogs, and springs, sometimes involving human remains, highlight cosmological and spiritual frameworks linking material culture, landscape, and community identity. These practices underscore the centrality of ritual, territory, and social differentiation in Iron Age Britain. By the end of the Iron Age, circa 43 AD, Britain consisted of a mosaic of tribal territories, each with distinctive material culture, settlement patterns, and social hierarchies. Prominent tribes included the Brigantes in northern England, the Iceni in East Anglia, the Trinovants in the Thames Valley, the Cativalani in Hertfordshire, and the Durotriges in Dorset. Each tribe controlled agricultural land, fortified settlements, ritual centers, and trade networks, exercising authority through lineage, kinship, and military capability. Interaction between tribes included trade, intermarriage, alliance formation, and occasional conflict, producing dynamic social landscapes and complex regional identities. Iron Age Britain represents a culmination of long-term cultural, technological, and environmental adaptation initiated in earlier periods. The integration of iron technology, specialized craft production, agricultural intensification, fortified settlements, trade networks, and ceremonial landscapes illustrates the capacity of communities to organize labor, manage resources, and navigate social and ecological challenges. These developments established the foundation for subsequent Roman interaction and conquest, providing the material, social, and political framework that shaped the initial phases of provincial integration under Roman administration. The Roman conquest of Britain began in 43 AD under Emperor Claudius, following prior expeditions, including Julius Caesar's campaigns in 55 and 54 BC, which had established a temporary military presence and intelligence on local tribes. The Claudian invasion marked the establishment of permanent Roman authority in southern and central Britain and initiated a period of profound political, social, economic, and cultural transformation. Roman Britain, or Britannia as designated within the imperial administrative framework, evolved over the following centuries into a complex province integrated into the Roman Empire, characterized by urban development, infrastructure construction, agricultural intensification, trade networks, military fortifications, and administrative structures. The initial invasion was executed with the deployment of the 2 Augusta, 9 Hispana, and 14 Gemina legions, accompanied by auxiliary units drawn from across the empire. These forces landed along the southeastern coast, likely at Richborough in Kent, securing strategic points and establishing logistical bases. Roman military organization emphasized discipline, engineering capability, and strategic mobility, enabling successive campaigns against resistant tribal groups. The conquest proceeded in stages, with southern territories, including the territories of the Cativalani and Trinovants, brought under control first, followed by the establishment of Roman influence over territories in modern Hampshire, Wiltshire, and the Thames Valley. Resistance by tribes such as the Iceni in East Anglia, led by Queen Boudica in 60 to 61 AD, resulted in a major uprising, demonstrating both the limits of initial Roman control and the capacity for organized local military opposition. Boudica's revolt was ultimately suppressed by the Roman governor Suetonius Paulinus, solidifying Roman authority in the southeast while highlighting the necessity of sustained military presence. Roman military strategy in Britain combined permanent fortification with extensive road networks. Forts and marching camps were established throughout the province, facilitating troop deployment, territorial control, and administrative oversight. Notable military sites include Camulodunum, modern Colchester, the first colonia established as a base for Roman administration and veteran settlement; Verulamium, St. Albans, an urban center combining military, administrative, and economic functions; and Londinium, London, which emerged as a commercial hub and regional administrative center. Roads, constructed using layered foundations of stone and gravel, provided durable transport routes connecting forts, towns, and ports, enhancing mobility for military, commercial, and civilian purposes. Urbanization under Roman administration transformed the physical and social landscape of Britain. Roman urban centers were constructed following standardized layouts, with orthogonal street grids, defensive walls, public buildings, forums, basilicas, baths, and amphitheaters. Urban planning emphasized infrastructure, including aqueducts, sewers, and public water supplies, facilitating hygiene, commerce, and civic activity. Villas and rural estates were established across southern and central Britain, integrating agricultural production, elite residence, and cultural display. These estates exemplified the Romanization of the countryside, introducing new building techniques, farming methods, and architectural styles. Economic transformation under Roman rule was marked by integration into the broader imperial economy. Britain produced agricultural surplus, including cereals, livestock, wool, and specialized commodities such as tin from Cornwall, which was valued for bronze production across the empire. Roman coinage, minted and circulated widely, facilitated trade, taxation, and payment for military services. Markets developed in urban centers and along major roads, supporting the exchange of locally produced goods, imported luxury items, and manufactured materials. Roman imports included Mediterranean wine, olive oil, ceramics, and glass, as well as metalwork and other luxury products from Gaul and beyond. Economic integration supported both elite consumption and military provisioning, linking Britain to imperial trade networks spanning Europe, North Africa, and the Eastern Mediterranean. Roman law, administration, and taxation systems were implemented to consolidate control and integrate the province into the empire. Governance was structured around the office of the governor, supported by legates, procurators, and local administrative officials. Roman legal frameworks regulated property, commerce, and criminal justice. Hadrian's Wall, constructed beginning in 122 AD during the reign of Emperor Hadrian, represented the northern frontier of Roman Britain and a key instrument of territorial control. The wall extended approximately 117 kilometers from the Solway Firth in the west to the River Tyne in the east, and was reinforced with forts, mile castles, turrets, and roads along its length. The construction and garrisoning of Hadrian's Wall reflected both defensive strategy and administrative control, regulating movement, trade, and interaction between Roman-controlled territories and unconquered northern populations, including the Picts. The Antonine Wall, built further north in modern Scotland during the mid-2nd century, represented a temporary advance of Roman authority, subsequently abandoned in favor of the more defensible Hadrianic frontier. These frontier systems illustrate the logistical capacity, military engineering, and territorial strategy of the Roman administration. Military and civilian interaction was a defining feature of Roman Britain. The presence of legionary fortresses, auxiliary forts, and urban centers facilitated cultural, economic, and technological exchange between Roman settlers, administrators, and local populations. Roman material culture, including pottery, metalwork, coinage, clothing, and domestic architecture, was adopted by sections of the native population. Religious practices exhibited syncretism, with Roman deities and cults integrated alongside indigenous gods and rituals. Temples, shrines, and sacred spaces were constructed, demonstrating the intersection of imperial ideology, local beliefs, and civic ritual. Resistance and accommodation coexisted throughout Roman rule. While southern and eastern Britain experienced extensive urbanization, agricultural intensification, and cultural assimilation, northern and western regions, including Wales and parts of Scotland, retained distinct cultural practices and intermittent resistance. Archaeological evidence indicates continued indigenous settlement patterns, including hill fort reuse, farmsteads, and ritual sites, alongside Roman infrastructure. Rebel activity, exemplified by the Boudican revolt and later disturbances, underscores the persistence of tribal identity, localized authority, and opposition to Roman impositions. These dynamics necessitated sustained military presence, administrative oversight, and strategic negotiation. Infrastructure development under Roman authority facilitated economic growth, administrative efficiency, and social integration. Roads, including the Fosseway, Watling Street, and Ermine Street, connected military installations, towns, and ports. Bridges, aqueducts, and drainage systems enhanced communication, transport, and agricultural productivity. Port towns such as Portus Dubris, Dover, and Retupii, Richborough, supported maritime logistics, trade, and military reinforcement. Urban amenities, including baths, amphitheaters, marketplaces, and public buildings, facilitated civic engagement, cultural expression, and elite patronage. The material and structural legacy of Roman infrastructure provided enduring frameworks for subsequent centuries of settlement and governance. Agriculture under Roman Britain became more intensive and specialized. Plow technology, including the iron-tipped ard, allowed greater efficiency in the cultivation of cereals such as wheat, barley, and oats. Vine cultivation, olive trees, and horticulture were introduced in limited forms in southern regions. Livestock management expanded to include cattle, sheep, pigs, and goats, with evidence for dairying, wool production, and meat supply for both local consumption and urban centers. Water management, including drainage ditches, irrigation, and flood control, improved soil productivity and facilitated settlement expansion in flood-prone areas. Agricultural estates, villa complexes, and rural settlements demonstrate integration of Roman methods with local environmental knowledge. Trade and market activity reflected integration into the imperial economy, with long-distance exchange linking Britain to Gaul, Hispania, the Mediterranean, and Northern Europe. Imported ceramics, amphory, and glassware reflect the consumption of luxury goods, while exported commodities included metals, agricultural products, and timber. Market towns facilitated regional commerce, providing focal points for urban-rural interaction and monetary transactions. Coinage enabled standardized exchange, taxation, and payment for military and civic services. Distribution of Roman and indigenous artifacts indicates both economic interaction and cultural adaptation. integrating local and imperial production and consumption patterns. Cultural and religious adaptation was central to Romanization. Indigenous practices persisted alongside Roman innovations, creating hybrid forms of worship, ritual, and artistic expression. Temples, shrines, and votive deposits coexisted with native sacred sites, while material culture, including pottery, jewelry, and household objects, exhibited syncretism between Roman and local styles. Literacy, in the form of Latin inscriptions, official documentation, and monumental dedications, was introduced among elites, facilitating communication, governance, and ideological integration. Education, civic participation, and access to Roman institutions were limited primarily to urban and administrative centers, reflecting stratification and selective cultural assimilation. Military strategy and frontier management were central to the governance of Roman Britain. Forts, watchtowers, and patrol systems along Hadrian's Wall and key river valleys regulated mobility, trade, and tribal interaction. Auxiliary units recruited from other provinces supported defense, policing, and logistical functions, maintaining imperial authority. Cavalry, infantry, and engineering units facilitated rapid deployment, fort construction, and frontier maintenance. The Roman military presence was complemented by local levies and the integration of client communities, ensuring both defensive capacity and political control across the province. By the late 4th and early 5th centuries AD, Roman Britain experienced administrative, military, and economic challenges linked to broader imperial pressures. Increased taxation, military withdrawal, and external threats, including Saxon raids and Pictish incursions, strained provincial systems. Urban centers and rural estates continued to function, but imperial authority weakened, resulting in the emergence of localized power structures and regional adaptation of Roman infrastructure, culture, and governance. These developments laid the groundwork for the transition into sub-Roman Britain, wherein former Roman administrative, economic, and cultural frameworks persisted alongside evolving local political structures. Roman Britain represents a period of profound transformation, characterized by the integration of technological innovation, urban planning, administrative control, and cultural exchange. Military conquest, fortification, urbanization, agricultural intensification, trade networks, and ritual practice collectively reshaped the human landscape. Regional variation, resistance, and cultural syncretism illustrate the complex interplay between indigenous populations and Roman authority, resulting in a hybridized society that balanced continuity and change over nearly 4 centuries of imperial presence. By 410 AD, the withdrawal of Roman forces marked the end of formal provincial administration, but left enduring legacies in infrastructure, material culture, social organization, and settlement patterns that influenced the trajectory of post-Roman Britain. The period following the formal withdrawal of Roman administration from Britain, beginning around 410 AD, marks the sub-Roman or post-Roman era, extending roughly to 600 AD. This transitional period is characterized by the persistence of Roman cultural, economic, and infrastructural elements alongside increasing decentralization of political authority, the emergence of localized power structures, demographic change, and the arrival and settlement of Germanic groups, including the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes. Sub-Roman Britain represents a complex historical phase in which continuity and transformation intersect, producing a hybrid society bridging the late antique and early medieval periods. The withdrawal of Roman forces was a response to military, political, and economic pressures within the Western Roman Empire. By the early 5th century, legions stationed in Britain were increasingly redeployed to continental Europe to address internal threats and external invasions, leaving provincial administration to local elites and urban authorities. Imperial support for military defense, taxation, and centralized governance ceased, resulting in the gradual erosion of formal structures. Local leaders, often former Romano-British magistrates, landowners, or military commanders, assumed de facto authority over towns, rural estates, and surrounding territories. These figures maintained elements of Roman governance, including administration of law, management of land and resources, and the organization of defense, but in a context of reduced central oversight and growing regional autonomy. Urban centers that had flourished under Roman administration experienced varied trajectories during the sub-Roman period. Londinium, Verulamium, and Camulodunum exhibited signs of contraction, partial abandonment, and decline in population density, though some urban infrastructure, including roads, baths, defensive walls, and bridges, continued to function. Archaeological evidence suggests selective maintenance of key civic structures, particularly fortifications and storage facilities, while commercial, religious, and administrative activity declined. Smaller towns, villa estates, and rural settlements became increasingly important as loci of local authority, agricultural production, and community cohesion. These settlements and agriculture remained the primary subsistence strategy during sub-Roman Britain, with mixed farming systems adapted to both environmental and social conditions. Cereals, including wheat, barley, and oats, continued to be cultivated, supplemented by legumes, flax, and other crops. Animal husbandry remained central, with cattle, sheep, pigs, and goats providing meat, milk, wool, and labor. Archaeobotanical and faunal evidence indicate continuity in crop and livestock management, although changes in field systems, woodland exploitation, and settlement patterns reflect adaptation to reduced population density, social fragmentation, and regional instability. The integration of Roman agricultural practices, including plow technology, drainage, and field enclosures, persisted alongside localized techniques adapted to topography and climate. Trade and economic activity during the sub-Roman period were reduced in scale and complexity relative to the Roman era, but continued to exhibit regional and long-distance interaction. Localized markets developed around villa estates, fortified settlements, and surviving urban centers, facilitating the exchange of agricultural produce, craft goods, and raw materials. Imported Mediterranean products, such as pottery, glass, and metalwork, became scarce after the cessation of formal Roman supply networks, but evidence of contact with continental Europe, particularly northern Gaul, persists. Maritime and riverine transport remained crucial for trade and communication, with ports, estuaries, and navigable rivers serving as conduits for the movement of goods, people, and cultural influences. Material culture during sub-Roman Britain exhibits continuity with Roman forms alongside adaptation to new social realities. Pottery styles retained Roman techniques, including wheel-thrown and decorated wares, but also incorporated simplified, regionally distinctive forms. Metalwork, including tools, weapons, and domestic items, demonstrates continuity in craftsmanship with occasional innovation or reuse of Roman objects. Glass, jewelry, and ornaments reflect elite consumption and cultural identity, often repurposed or adapted from Roman prototypes. Timber construction, wattle and daub techniques, and defensive earthworks became increasingly common, reflecting local resource utilization, population dispersal, and strategic considerations in an era of reduced central authority. Political authority during the sub-Roman period was highly decentralized, with localized rulers exercising control over territories formerly administered by Roman officials. These figures, often identified as petty kings, warlords, or regional chieftains, managed land, resources, and military defense. Tribal and kinship networks played a central role in maintaining social cohesion, mediating conflict, and organizing collective labor. Evidence from fortified sites, including reused hill forts, Roman urban fortifications, and newly constructed enclosures, indicates the exercise of authority through control of strategic positions, agricultural resources, and transport routes. Political organization was fluid, with alliances, rivalries, and occasional conflict shaping regional power dynamics. The arrival and settlement of Germanic groups, Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, from northern continental Europe marked a significant demographic and cultural shift. Initial incursions during the 5th century likely involved a combination of mercenary service, raiding, and settlement under invitation from local elites seeking military assistance. Over time, these groups established permanent settlements, displacing or assimilating Romano-British populations in eastern and southern regions. Archaeological evidence, including burial practices, weapon typologies, and settlement organization, demonstrates the introduction of new cultural patterns, social structures, and material culture, contributing to the formation of Anglo-Saxon polities. Linguistic and toponymic evidence indicates integration of Germanic languages alongside surviving Brittonic dialects. Religious and cultural practices in sub-Roman Britain reflect continuity, adaptation, and transformation. Christianity, introduced during the late Roman period, persisted in some regions, particularly urban centers and southern territories. Churches, chapels, and Christian burial practices continued alongside indigenous pagan practices, including ritual deposition, sacred site usage, and local cosmologies. Material evidence of early Christian communities includes inscribed stones, simple architectural foundations, and ecclesiastical objects, demonstrating the persistence of Roman-inspired religious frameworks. Syncretism between Roman, indigenous, and incoming Germanic traditions shaped spiritual practice, ritual observance, and community identity. Military and defensive considerations were central to sub-Roman society, driven by the absence of imperial support and increased external threats. Fortifications, including reused Roman walls, hill forts, and newly constructed enclosures, provided refuge, controlled strategic terrain, and signaled authority. Coastal and riverine areas were particularly vulnerable to raiding, necessitating localized military organization. Archaeological evidence of weapons, armor, and defensive works indicates preparedness for both raiding and intergroup conflict. Military leaders often emerged as political authorities, combining martial capability with administrative and territorial control, reinforcing social hierarchy and consolidating power. Continuity of Roman infrastructure facilitated adaptation and survival during the sub-Roman period. Roads, bridges, drainage systems, and urban walls were maintained in modified form, supporting transportation, defense, and communication. Villa estates often retained operational structures, including storage facilities, water management systems, and productive workshops. These sites functioned as economic, social, and administrative hubs, enabling elite families to maintain authority and sustain agricultural production. Urban and rural landscapes reflect both retention of Roman planning principles and pragmatic adaptation to a decentralized, localized political environment. Subsistence strategies incorporated diversified production systems, integrating crop cultivation, livestock rearing, and exploitation of wild resources. Woodland management, seasonal transhumance, hunting, and fishing supplemented domestic production, ensuring resilience in the face of population contraction and social instability. Storage and redistribution systems persisted on a local scale, enabling community survival and elite consolidation. Environmental adaptation, including land clearance, irrigation, and enclosure construction, reflects continuity of Roman techniques while accommodating demographic and political change. Cultural interaction during the sub-Roman period was dynamic, involving the coexistence of Romano-British traditions, indigenous practices, and Germanic influences. Material culture, including ceramics, metalwork, and personal adornments, exhibits hybridization and regional variation. Settlement organization, architectural forms, and defensive structures integrate Roman, local, and incoming elements. Linguistic evidence, toponymy, and place name studies indicate a layered cultural landscape, with surviving Celtic, Latin, and emerging Germanic linguistic elements coexisting and influencing social identity. Burial and funerary practices reflect social continuity, adaptation, and cultural interaction. Romano-British cremation and inhumation persisted in urban and rural contexts, often incorporating grave goods and monuments indicative of status and lineage. Germanic-influenced burial practices, including furnished inhumation, ringed cemeteries, and weapon deposition, emerge in eastern and southern regions, signaling the establishment of new social hierarchies and cultural frameworks. Variability in mortuary treatment highlights regional differences, temporal changes, and the interplay of social, religious, and cultural factors. The sub-Roman period is characterized by regional differentiation in political, economic, and social organization. Southern and Eastern Britain experienced greater Germanic settlement, hybridization of material culture, and the decline of Roman urban institutions. Western and northern regions, including Wales, Cumbria, and Scotland, retained stronger continuity of Romano-British traditions, with hill forts, rural estates, and localized authority persisting. Regional variation reflects ecological conditions, population density, strategic considerations, and patterns of external interaction, producing a mosaic of adaptive responses across the former province. By the end of the sub-Roman period, circa 600 AD, Britain exhibited a complex and fragmented political landscape. Localized kingdoms and tribal polities had emerged, integrating surviving Romano-British infrastructure, indigenous practices, and Germanic cultural elements. Trade and communication persisted regionally, maintaining economic networks despite reduced scale relative to the Roman period. Settlement patterns demonstrated continuity in rural estates and fortified sites, while urban centers had largely contracted or transformed. The period set the stage for the formation of early medieval polities, including the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms of the Heptarchy, and continued interaction with Celtic and Irish communities in Western Britain. Sub-Roman Britain represents a transitional epoch in which Roman legacies, indigenous practices, and incoming Germanic elements intersected to produce a culturally, politically, and economically hybrid society. The period demonstrates resilience, adaptation, and continuity of human activity in the absence of centralized imperial authority. The integration of Roman infrastructure, local governance, agricultural expertise, material culture, and ritual practice with emergent social structures and Germanic influences underscores the dynamic and multi-layered character of this historical phase, bridging the Roman and early medieval eras in Britain. The history of ancient Britain, spanning the interval from approximately 800,000 BC to 410 AD, represents a continuous narrative of human occupation, technological development, social organization, and interaction with environmental and continental forces. This extensive time frame, encompassing the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, Bronze Age, Iron Age, and Roman periods, illustrates the evolution of human societies from small, mobile hunter-gatherer groups to complex, hierarchical political and economic systems under Roman administration. The continuity of human adaptation, coupled with periodic external influence, provides a comprehensive account of the cultural, technological, and environmental transformations that define the prehistoric and early historic landscape of Britain. The earliest evidence of human occupation in Britain dates to approximately 800,000 BC, during the Lower Paleolithic. Hominin species, including Homo antecessor and Homo heidelbergensis, inhabited southern and eastern regions of the island intermittently, as climatic fluctuations associated with glacial and interglacial cycles created variable environmental conditions. Archaeological finds, including flint hand axes, scrapers, and butchered animal bones from sites such as Haysborough, Boxgrove, and Pakefield, provide insight into subsistence strategies, tool manufacture, and mobility patterns. These early populations were highly adaptive, responding to shifts in climate, sea levels, and the availability of flora and fauna. Occupation during this period was characterized by small, seasonal groups whose survival depended on hunting, scavenging, and foraging, with evidence suggesting repeated occupation and abandonment linked to environmental cycles. During the Mesolithic period, approximately 10,000 to 4,000 BC, the retreat of the ice sheets following the last glacial maximum transformed Britain's environment. Rising temperatures led to the establishment of dense forests, wetlands, and river systems, supporting a diverse range of flora and fauna. Hunter-gatherer communities utilized the landscape for seasonal exploitation of resources, including deer, wild boar, fish, shellfish, and edible plants. Sites such as Starcar in North Yorkshire reveal evidence of semi-permanent structures, hearths, and complex toolkits, including microliths, points, and fishing equipment, reflecting increasing sophistication in technology and subsistence. The Mesolithic period also demonstrates growing regional variation in material culture, indicating localized adaptation and emerging social differentiation within mobile, small-scale populations. The Neolithic period, 4000 to 2500 BC, represents a major transformation in human society through the introduction of agriculture, animal domestication, and permanent settlement. Cereals, including wheat and barley, were cultivated, while cattle and sheep were raised for meat, milk, and wool. This subsistence base supported population growth and sedentary communities. Monumental architecture, including henges, long barrows, and stone circles such as Stonehenge and Avebury, reflects complex social organization, religious activity, and labor coordination. Pottery production, polished stone tools, and trade networks linking Britain with continental Europe demonstrate technological innovation, craft specialization, and interregional communication. Neolithic communities exhibit the early development of hierarchical social structures, with labor mobilization for monumental construction projects indicative of organized authority. The Bronze Age, 2500 to 800 BC, is distinguished by the adoption of copper and bronze metallurgy for tools, weapons, and ornaments. The period saw the construction of burial mounds, ceremonial sites, and increasingly complex settlements. Trade networks facilitated the acquisition of tin and copper from regions such as Cornwall and Devon, supporting technological advancement and interregional exchange. Settlements evolved to include permanent structures, planned layouts, and evidence of social stratification. Hill forts began to appear during the later Bronze Age, representing early forms of territorial defense and hierarchical organization. Continuity from Neolithic cultural practices is evident alongside the introduction of new technologies, social differentiation, and economic specialization. Iron Age Britain, 800 BC to 43 AD, was characterized by the widespread adoption of iron metallurgy, producing tools, weapons, and agricultural implements of superior strength and durability. Tribal societies, speaking Celtic languages, dominated the landscape, organized around kinship, lineage, and territorial authority. Hill forts became widespread, functioning as defensive sites, social centers, and symbols of status. Prominent tribes included the Brigantes, Iceni, Trinovants, and Catavilani. Agricultural intensification, pastoralism, craft specialization, and trade persisted alongside ritual practices, including votive deposition in rivers, bogs, and sacred sites. Material culture, settlement patterns, and ritual landscapes reveal regional variation and demonstrate the interplay between technological innovation, environmental adaptation, and social hierarchy. Trade networks connected Britain internally and with continental Europe, facilitating the exchange of iron, pottery, textiles, and prestige goods. The Roman conquest of Britain, initiated in 43 AD under Emperor Claudius, introduced new political, administrative, economic, and cultural systems. Roman military forces established provincial authority over southern and central Britain, founding urban centers such as Londinium, Verulamium, and Camulodunum. Infrastructure projects, including roads, bridges, forts, aqueducts, and Hadrian's Wall, facilitated military control, trade, and integration into the imperial economy. Roman administration introduced law, taxation, and bureaucratic oversight, while local elites were co-opted into governance structures. Urbanization, villa estates, and rural agricultural intensification reflected the Romanization of settlement patterns, production systems, and social organization. The persistence of indigenous cultural elements, coupled with the selective adoption of Roman practices, produced a hybridized society, particularly evident in peripheral regions and among resistant tribes such as the Iceni, Brigantes, and populations in Wales and Scotland. Roman Britain maintained economic integration with the wider empire, supporting both local subsistence and imperial demand. Agricultural production, including cereals, livestock, and specialized commodities such as tin, contributed to local and long-distance exchange. Markets in urban centers facilitated trade in foodstuffs, crafts, and imported goods, including pottery, glassware, wine, and olive oil from the Mediterranean. Coinage and standardized measurement systems enabled efficient commerce, taxation, and military provisioning. Craft specialization, including metalworking, pottery, and textiles, continued alongside urban and rural settlements, demonstrating technological continuity and adaptation under Roman influence. Cultural and religious transformation occurred during Roman Britain, marked by syncretism between indigenous practices and Roman religious, civic, and material traditions. Temples, shrines, and sacred sites were constructed alongside traditional ritual locations. Material culture, including domestic architecture, ceramics, and personal adornment, reflects the adoption of Roman techniques, artistic motifs, and practical innovations. Literacy, in the form of Latin inscriptions, monumental dedications, and administrative records, spread among elites and urban populations, facilitating governance, communication, and cultural integration. Christianity emerged during the later Roman period, evidenced by burial practices, inscribed stones, and ecclesiastical foundations, establishing the early framework for post-Roman religious developments. The northern frontier of Roman Britain, exemplified by Hadrian's Wall and the temporary Antonine Wall, illustrates strategic, military, and administrative priorities. Forts, mile castles, and garrison positions controlled movement, trade, and tribal interaction while providing defense against northern populations, including the Picts. Military infrastructure, road networks, and coastal fortifications reinforced imperial authority, facilitated rapid troop deployment, and maintained territorial control. Interaction between Roman forces, local populations, and allied tribal communities fostered cultural exchange, economic activity, and political negotiation, producing a multifaceted social landscape. The transition to sub-Roman Britain, beginning around 410 AD, reflects the withdrawal of formal Roman authority and the persistence of Romano-British cultural, economic, and infrastructural elements. Local leaders and warlords assumed authority over former provincial territories, maintaining elements of urban and rural administration, defense, and agricultural management. Settlement patterns adapted, with urban contraction, rural estate prominence, and reuse of Roman infrastructure. Germanic incursions and settlements, including the Angles, Saxons, and Jutes, introduced new cultural, linguistic, and political dynamics, resulting in hybridized societies. Material culture, agricultural practices, and ritual traditions continued alongside adaptations to a fragmented political landscape, bridging the late Roman and early medieval periods. Across the entire span of ancient British history, the evolution of human activity demonstrates a continuous interplay between environmental adaptation, technological innovation, social organization, and interaction with continental Europe. From the earliest Paleolithic hominins through Mesolithic mobility, Neolithic agricultural and ceremonial development, Bronze Age metallurgy and social stratification, Iron Age tribal structures and fortifications, Roman urbanization and administration, to the transitional sub-Roman period, evidence indicates dynamic responses to ecological, social, and political challenges. Human populations in Britain continuously modified landscapes, developed specialized skills, and engaged in regional and long-distance technological developments, including flint tool manufacture, agricultural implements, metallurgy, and Roman construction techniques, facilitated subsistence, craft specialization, and urbanization. Trade networks connected Britain internally and with continental Europe, fostering the exchange of raw materials, manufactured goods, and cultural practices. Religious and ritual activity, evident from Neolithic monuments to Roman temples and sub-Roman ecclesiastical foundations, provides insight into social cohesion, belief systems, and cosmological understanding. Environmental adaptation, including woodland management, drainage, cultivation, and settlement location, underscores the importance of ecological knowledge and resource exploitation in human survival and societal development. The narrative of ancient Britain, framed chronologically and thematically, integrates multiple lines of evidence, emphasizing accuracy, continuity, and contextualization. Patterns of technological innovation, social differentiation, economic integration, territorial control, and cultural interaction recur across periods, illustrating both continuity and change. The convergence of indigenous development and external influence shaped the trajectory of human occupation, producing distinct regional identities while contributing to a broader British historical framework. The cumulative effect of these developments establishes a comprehensive, evidence-based account of ancient Britain that is suitable for global, academic, and documentary presentation. By tracing the trajectory from 800,000 BC through the sub-Roman period, this narrative illustrates the long-term processes underlying human adaptation, societal complexity, and integration into continental networks. Each period, Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, Bronze Age, Iron Age, Roman, and Sub-Roman, contributes discrete technological, social, and cultural innovations while forming part of a continuous historical continuum. Material evidence, settlement organization, ritual landscapes, and political structures provide insight into how populations navigated climatic shifts, population pressures, intergroup competition, and imperial integration. These developments collectively produce a detailed and cohesive account of ancient Britain as a dynamic and evolving human landscape.